You are now listening to a podcast made in collaboration with the Copenhagen College Radio.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to episode 76 of the Social Media and Politics podcast, bringing you expert insights into how social media is changing the political game. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, political scientist at the University of Copenhagen. You can follow us on Twitter at SMNP Podcast and sign up for the newsletter on our website, socialmediaandpolitics.org. All right, y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in. In this episode, I'm going to be speaking with Bill Ottman. He is the founder and CEO of a crypto social network called Minds. And if you want to check it out, you can go to minds.com. It has about 200,000 monthly active users. And what it does is it allows users on the platform to earn tokens that are connected to a cryptocurrency. And those can be used to send to other users as tips, or they can be used to boost content, much in the way that Facebook allows you to, except it doesn't have the algorithmic filtering that Facebook does. So we know recently Facebook made a lot of changes to its algorithm that decreased the organic reach of publishers' posts. And Minds is trying to counter that by putting the sort of algorithmic function into the hands of users. So it has a lot of different social media wrapped up into it. It's got channels like YouTube. It's got a sort of blogging platform. You can like and retweet, or as they call it, remind. And in doing so, earn tokens that are connected to a Minds coin, which is part of the Ethereum crypto network. So that's cool. They're doing some interesting things with blockchain technology as well. There is no censorship on the site. So there have been some accusations against Minds for, harboring right-wing extremist content. So we're going to get into how Bill feels about that. But overall, I think it's a really interesting interview to see kind of platforms that are responding to the dominance of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. What's the alternative and where might things be going in the future? So without further ado, let me turn it over to Bill Ottman. Again, he is the CEO and founder of Minds. Bill, thanks so much for taking the time out and welcome to the Social Media and Politics podcast.
Psyched to be here.
Can you start out by telling us just a bit in your own words what Minds is and why you decided to start it?
Yeah. So Minds is a free and open source social networking platform. We have around 1.5 million users. We have a native cryptocurrency that you earn for your contributions, and then you can use the tokens for promoting your posts. One token will give you 1,000 extra impressions on whatever content you boost. You can send them peer-to-peer to other users in exchange for rewards, sort of in a crowdfunding model. And essentially, we're just, very focused on transparency, privacy, digital rights, and doing everything the inverse of the mainstream proprietary surveillance social networks.
Right. And I want to get into those motivations a bit later, but I want to kind of start out and lay out what Minds is. I've been playing around, trying out some of the features, and it kind of seems like a one-stop shop for social media, right? It has hashtags like Twitter. It's got channels like YouTube. It has a kind of blogging interface like Medium. So I wanted to ask, how did you decide on the features and functions to include and not include?
It's been an evolution. I mean, we want full multimedia capabilities. So like in the last 6 months, we actually brought in video chat into the groups feature. We brought in group chat. We have an encrypted messenger as well. I mean, if you look at what's happening with most major social apps, they're sort of all becoming the same thing. You have video, you have a feed, you have messages, and so on. And, whether it's YouTube or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, they're all gravitating towards this common set of functionality, which I think is very interesting because it's sort of showing us how people prefer to communicate. And so I think it's fair to be aware of trends, but not be slave to them. So we do want people to be able to communicate as well as possible, and that is going to inevitably include things like live streaming and stories and everything that you expect from the multi-billion-dollar social networks. So we're sort of charging at that. And, meanwhile, we're also building in more community-centric features. Like we're building this jury system right now for the whole community moderation functionality so that the users can actually be a part of the moderation process. It's not just like this hierarchical bureaucracy where there's no access to the rationale behind the decision making and, whether it's taking down content or whatever. So I guess we just listen to the community mostly on what people want. That sort of drives our priorities. And we actually do all of our development fully out in the open on gitlab.com/minds. Anyone can vote on features they want. They can even help build features. So, we're definitely just listening to what people want.
Right. And that was actually my next question, which is about the open source aspect, which I know you've talked about quite a bit. For our non-tech oriented listeners in the programming sense out there, what exactly does it mean that your platform is open source, and sort of why is it open source?
What it means is that the code that makes the app is available for anyone to take and inspect or make their own version of our app, launch your own social network. That's actually something that we will help people do. And it's just more subject to public scrutiny and peer review. So, people are aware of what our algorithms are doing. And if we're doing anything sketchy, hopefully they can find it, which, I hope we're not. I don't think we are, but it gives you the ability to understand. It's not that you even care. It's like, all right, with your food, you want there to be transparency that there's no crazy chemicals in your food. You're not going to most likely be the one who goes and does all that research, but there is a community of experts who would want to do that research for the benefit of the world. So that's why it's the principle. It's not so much that we expect any normal person is going to do it.
Because it seems to me that's quite a risk to put your proprietary code out on the internet. I mean, do you get some sort of benefit for having people improve it? Is that part of the reason? Or because it seems just kind of with these other platforms, they have these proprietary algorithms, that are black box.
Right.
So what's in it from your end in that regard?
I mean, there's everything's in it. I felt a little bit of that initial fear when we were opening up our code that, oh my gosh, someone's going to come and steal what we did, and that would be horrible. But first of all, it's really not rational. It's fear-based, and if you look at top tech companies like Mongo Database or WordPress, even, which is an open source blogging platform, or Wikipedia, even. But Linux, generally speaking, anyone who doesn't know, it's an open source operating system that's in Android and in millions of devices all over the world, pretty much powering the global tech infrastructure at the server level. So under the license, the AGPLv3, the general public license, if anyone takes our code, they actually have to show the changes with everybody. So that's where there's a distinction between a copyleft free software license with a regular open source license, which would be like the Apache license or MIT. And those are cool too. Those basically allow anyone to do anything that, they can take it and they don't have to share the changes. And then, so there's this spectrum of different types of licenses where, full public domain actually means you don't even have to give any credit at all. You can just take it and do anything you want with it. You can pretend it's yours for all anyone cares. But then, most licenses require that you repost the license and repost credit to, the author, but you can still take it and sell it and do whatever you want. And then, AGPLv3 is really interesting because it sort of has embedded in the language and the policy that everyone has to share the results with everyone. And so it sort of propels innovation in that respect. So, the reason that free and open source projects are able to grow is because it's more easy to achieve network effects. You can get more developers involved. There's, just because it's free and open source doesn't mean you can necessarily trust it, but it means that it's more able to be trusted. You're not able to trust closed source proprietary software like Facebook and Twitter and Google, because even if it was secure behind the scenes, there would be no way for them to actually prove that it is.
Right. I wanted to ask about the content on Minds, because I know from a user experience, just logging in, you're supposed to follow a bunch of hashtags that range from fashion to art, kind of general stuff we'd see on social media. What are the most popular hashtags on Minds? What's the kind of content that's going on there?
The most popular is probably art, music, original photography. There's this one hashtag called MyPhoto, which has gotten really big, which, just means that it's yours. It's not just a repost that you stole. And people really like that because they tend to like original content the most. It's more authentic. It's not you just trying to drive traffic to your page, just scouring the internet for the best content and sort of taking it. And that's really popular. Also, politics, news. We have lots of activists, journalists, writers, people who are really concerned with what's going on in the world. Those, and then also like technology, blockchain, lots of crypto people as well.
Yeah, that's what I noticed. My impression was it's the crypto and the blockchain group was the most active that I could see.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the key differences with Minds from other social media is the ability to pay other users, particularly in cryptocurrency. So I want to ask, what's the thought process behind that model of sharing cryptocurrency to boost a post or to reward other users for content?
Yeah, I mean, the crypto has been so much fun to integrate. We had a point system back in the day in like 2015 when we first launched the apps, where it's just an internal currency, points you would earn for doing things, and then 1 point would give you 1 extra view if you earned it, and you could boost your post for more views. And we did it because the algorithms are basically strangling everybody's reach on all of the other social networks. So particularly on Facebook, most people are like, they hear the word algorithm and they just sort of a glaze goes over their eyes. But what many people care about is their likes and the engagement that they get on their posts. And over the past 5 years, organic reach has been declining intentionally on big networks because, they in their newsfeed by default show you things not in chronological order, but in a manner which they won't expose, which isn't, thousands of variables which predict what they think you're most likely to click on and be interested in. And they say that it's for quote unquote quality. But realistically, and I know many others would prefer to have control over my newsfeed. I want to get what I subscribe to when they post it. That's what I want as my default. And that's what we've committed to at Minds to do forever, which is always have the basic newsfeed be 100% organic, raw, chronological by default. And you can opt into other feeds with, trending or whatnot so that you can, see different types of prioritized content. But the betrayal that Google and Facebook and, and Instagram and, they're all starting to play with this. The betrayal is that they brought people in under this essentially a contract that, when you post, your followers are going to see what you post. And so thousands of media companies put years and years into Facebook. We even had pages on Facebook with like 5 million followers. And we're driving a ton of traffic through there. And then, over the years, a page that used to get thousands of interactions and upvotes or likes per post would now only get like 50. So, that was a bait and switch. They got everybody to come to the networks under this agreement or presupposition that you're going to get this reach. And then they got everyone in and they took it away because they knew they could monetize it. And they knew that, they could target certain things that you ads and whatnot that are going to benefit them more. So that was a huge red flag. And, along with the surveillance and the general misuse of data and, lack of digital democracy. It's just, I don't, and now millions of people don't consider these big networks to be sustainable.
Right, right. I have some counterpoints I want to come back to, but first, I want to stick on this idea of the cryptocurrency. Are you familiar with Article 13, the internet censorship thing? Oh, it's over here in the European Parliament.
Yes, I have heard of. Is it in effect? It is.
Yes.
It went in. Yeah.
So they voted for it as we're recording, basically, which the idea was basically it would put more money in the hands of the creators and artists, particularly of large record labels, but also independent producers, and sort of take that money away from the platform distributors. So I was wondering, before we started talking, I mean, wouldn't the crypto model be aimed at achieving a similar effect?
Well, Article 13 is sort of a hidden censorship bill, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
I mean, it's protecting quote unquote rights, but it also requires that content go through a proprietary filter before being uploaded to any number of networks, which in itself is a violation, because I would never want to require that my users be interacting with proprietary software that they didn't consent to or have any idea what it's doing to them. And there's so much danger in that filter. I mean, because that filter's sure it will spot some pirated content that should probably not be shared, but there's also going to be leagues of collateral damage, and that's just not the direction that we need to be moving. I don't think that that's a solution at all. So, but in terms of the crypto, I mean, people deserve to earn, we think, for their contributions to social networks. Users should come first. Creators, they're the lifeblood. They need to earn. And so by giving away one of the assets that we have, which is reach, we have eyeballs, newsfeed impressions. And so why not give that exposure to the people who are powering the network through this reward system? Because now one token will give you 1,000 impressions if you boost with the token.
Because I'm not so much of an expert in cryptocurrency, but I think everyone kind of knows that they've dropped quite a bit, from Bitcoin, and I know that the Minecoin is on Ethereum, which has sort of followed a similar decline. Has that affected that model at all in terms of how much users are being paid?
Well, we actually, so our token is pegged, the Mines token is pegged at 15 cents per token, and we sell it on Mines. We don't think of it in terms of money net per se. Mm-hmm. It is about the value that you get on Mines for the token. So, 1,000 impressions, which is what you can get with a token, is worth, on Facebook, you'll pay, granted they're hyper targeted, but you could pay up to $8 for 1,000 impressions. So, it's 15 cents on Mines. Granted, it's less targeted, but it's still valuable. And we're going to continue to improve the value of those impressions over time. So, I think people get confused in crypto and think, oh, it's just this sort of fledgling, digital money system that, granted has grown a lot, but it also dropped. People are clouded by that. That's not what crypto is about. Crypto is about a decentralized system of computers and networks which power the internet. It's a distributed database that can act as the engine for decentralized applications. So one of the biggest issues with sort of status quo social media is that they're all highly centralized. And, there's multiple dangers in that, from surveillance, censorship, but also just in the fact that the network can just go down at any time, and suddenly, all your stuff is stuck on this in the central location.
Yeah, I think Facebook and Instagram went down for a day and a half, something like that, recently, and there was a huge sort of media blitz about it.
Exactly. Yeah, it really affects people's lives. So in a peer-to-peer system, you have that resiliency. And you also have more digital rights and freedoms that are sort of protected with that. Now, decentralized databases are currently a little bit slower. They're not as mature, but over time, they're getting there, and they put more power in the user's hands. So for instance, the Minds tokens in our old system were just stored on Mind servers. But now your tokens, you can store them on your own wallet, which is basically an app on your phone or in your browser. We have no control over them. They're yours. They're not ours. And that type of mantra is really, really important. So, despite the price going down, the developer activity is skyrocketing on Ethereum and Bitcoin and many other blockchains. So that's what we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at, are people using applications, and are they using this decentralized infrastructure for utilities that are valuable to people? And over time, as long as that's happening, the money aspect of it will catch up with itself. Even if you just look over the lifetime of Bitcoin and Ethereum and many other cryptos, it's all upward trajectory. It's just, of course, it's going to take a long time to rebuild the infrastructure of the internet.
So I have some questions about this centralization versus decentralization. And one is looking at, Facebook is the largest social media company out there. And they've recently decided to merge their messaging services with, their subsidiaries, Instagram and WhatsApp. So that, on the one hand, is more centralization. But they've also promised to make those chats end-to-end encrypted. So do you see that as a positive step, or does the centralization kind of override the encryption?
I always found the encryption argument in WhatsApp, for instance, just kind of funny because, okay, now we're hearing Zuckerberg talk about encryption and decentralization, and they're working on actually a stable coin for WhatsApp, but it's honestly all irrelevant unless it's open source. The Bitcoin, Ethereum blockchains, if they're not open source blockchains, no one takes them seriously, except for like a couple, which are backed by huge banks. So end-to-end encryption is, they can go ahead and say that it's encrypted, but unless people can actually look at the code and see if there's no backdoors, then it's just PR. It's not, even if I wanted to trust them, you literally aren't in a position to be able to give them that credit.
Yeah, because isn't that the question? Wouldn't the platform say that when they do encryption, they're basically just promising it, and it might be that internally it is encrypted and they can't see it. Yep. And I think that's kind of the model. And I've talked to some Facebook researchers who said, we can't get this data. We wiped it. Yep. And then it becomes a matter of trust. So I guess that's their approach.
That is their approach. And, it's sort of the elephant in the room. It's very manipulative, I think, because they are ignoring the most clear and obvious way that they could communicate the truth of this to the world. And, they're just banking on the fact that, people will trust them and that people won't dig that deeply. The sad reality is that most people, first of all, don't even know the question to ask. The open source software is a totally foreign to most people. But what we're hoping is that, and it is happening, that there's sort of a group of apps that are emerging that do protect your privacy, are transparent, are working on decentralization. Places like, Mozilla and Brave and DuckDuckGo and, Minds and, lots of, the blockchain companies. This is becoming sort of like an unofficial alliance, and people are starting to recognize, like, I'll see, I don't go on Twitter often, but occasionally I'll pop in there, and you see people coupling all of these apps together and saying, here's the group of apps that you can use to replace, Safari and Chrome. And
yeah, I've seen that in a in-flight magazine with Brave and DuckDuckGo.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Interesting. Nice.
So yeah, a couple questions kind of scattered around here. I was listening to a podcast, Masters of Scale, if you know it, and they were talking to the founder of Flickr, and she was saying that when starting out a social media, you really need to be active in shaping the early community, because that early community is going to have shaping effects on the tone and the conversation moving down the platform.
Mm-hmm.
So do you agree with that, or does that creep into centralization in a way that, how do you start cultivating these early group of users, or do you just let them, just interact with the features as they want?
Yeah. So I think that, your marketing, your messaging, your positioning is all going to impact the types of people that you get. So of course, I think that, yeah, you want to target the people that you want. I would agree with them. I don't think that you should limit. I mean, we've had waves of users come from, areas that I'm particularly interested in, also not, and both are valuable. We have specifically been going after creators, people interested in crypto, privacy, journalism, activism. These are like very inspired types of people who are really valuable to networks, and it's been super successful. Also, with the free speech ethos, you do get some people who are particularly loud and obnoxious, but as long as you have tools to block that and mute, then I personally would much rather an environment where people can have open discourse and sort of let the discourse do the work, as opposed to like a lockdown censored environment, which the data seems to actually show that makes the problem worse, not better.
Right. Yeah, we'll get to that. I have a question on that point. But first, I've been searching around on Minds, as I mentioned, and, I wasn't actively following people, but I was just looking around in different groups and typing in different keywords.
Mm-hmm.
And, my impression, and this is, take it in stride, is that, a lot of the groups that I mentioned, maybe I wasn't looking in the right places. They weren't particularly as active as a Facebook community, for example. A lot of the users that I randomly kind of came upon, they might have 600 subscribers, but they're only getting one view, because you can see how many views their posts are getting.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that kind of frustrating. I didn't know where to go on the site. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, what would you say to people who kind of ask for the technology or want the technology to help them in assisting content discovery?
Yeah. So are you opted into canary mode?
I do not think so. I'm on the absolute standard.
Yeah. So we've been putting a huge effort into suggestions and new feed system. So if you click on your avatar on the top bar, you'll see a item called Canary, which is sort of the experimental mode of the site, which, the canary in the coal mine, kind of being willing to test the danger zone. There's no actual danger. It's just testing the newest features. Sometimes there can be a couple bugs, but we're about to roll out this new system probably next week to everybody. And the content discovery is so much easier. You can find the top posts under certain hashtags very easily. There's a little suggested channel widget to people that are deemed to be sort of in related to other people that you subscribe to. And so what I would recommend is just opt into Canary and then look around, and then let's chat again. I'm sure that you will feel much more confident with it.
Yeah, no, I went to the where people were reporting like the help section, and that was quite active. So there was a lot of fresh content there.
Not the best content, but content. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So another thing I noticed, and this is something you just alluded to, as someone who's very interested in politics, I typed that in, and of course, a lot of content came up that we might see in 4chan or 8chan or on platforms like Gab. And I'm sure you get these criticisms a lot. How do you respond to that content being on a platform that you've created?
Right. I mean, what's the alternative? Is the question that I ask myself. And based on the research that we've done, censorship makes the problem worse. As long as it's lawful and, not maliciously targeting or spamming the site, the tone that we're trying to set, and granted, you're always going to have people that don't have nice positive tone, but people do respect the platform, and they do often have drastically different views. But what happens when you ban that content is it goes to other platforms and gets more inflammatory and radicalized. And it just makes the internet a worse place. And all of the big networks seem to be playing this game of acting like they don't know that, but they do know that. And, they're just playing politics and PR and caving to their. I don't want to speculate, but I imagine that they're aware of this data because there have been dozens of major studies about it, and they can look at the data themselves. So, we just believe that the bad ideas will get weeded out, and by confronting these ideas with honest discourse over time, we think that will actually make the internet a safer place and will cause the best information to rise up. And we have human use cases of this with Daryl Davis and many others who have confronted members of the KKK, in fact befriended them and gotten them to leave the KKK just through open discourse. So that's the strategy. It isn't it's just not effective. So you can either confront the harsh stuff head on, or you can just hide from it, but you have to pick one. And I'm just not prepared to contribute to making that problem worse. And we have filters. You don't have to see that kind of stuff. We're trying to make it easier not to see anything you don't want to see and have that totally locked down. But I'm curious your take.
Yeah, one of our earlier episodes was with someone who did a study on Twitter and ISIS and found that the censorship, basically kicking someone off of Twitter, repeatedly losing their followers, could potentially signal that would trigger them to go out and act because they felt like they couldn't get their discourse out. So I'm aware of the backfire effect. What I'm curious, you alluded to it, is I know you have some limitations in place on the platform for how users can boost posts. So there's sort of checks as to how much you can manipulate or game the system that you have in place of boosting. Right. But the issue, and this is something we just discussed a couple episodes ago, looking at organization of these groups on 4chan, different internet boards, is that they tend to be organized and they can coalesce into groups and kind of break down quickly. And they kind of enjoy gaming platforms. So, how do you, that's where I think the danger is that if you have actors who are promoting really extreme views, they're sort of out to game every platform that they can. So in that sense, I think there's maybe a danger in somewhat normalizing views if people come across it too often. So I guess the question is the boost limitation enough to counter that organization? Or as someone who's creating a platform, how can you kind of approach that? Because other platforms, large and small, have been largely unsuccessful.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing because internet trolls and gamers, and they are smart a lot of the time, and they do know how to game systems. And we put these tools in place like rate limits, and we just hired a lead data scientist to help understand some things better so that we can de-game the system more. And it's also about putting it into the hands of the community to sort of decide. And I think the biggest danger is lack of connection between the community and the administrators of the network. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about some troll farm who teams up and they want to push out some certain content, that content could range from pictures of puppies and kitties to, some very malicious, harsh content. So we just want the community to be active in flagging things that they perceive to be suspicious, and the best that we can do is just have a constant feedback loop between what the community thinks about certain content and, involving them in that decision-making process. That is a bottom-up approach that I think is potentially scalable. What I don't think is scalable is expecting us, our small team, or any app's small team of administrators and developers to be able to tackle these problems alone. And that's why open data, community moderation, participatory networks are just, I think that's our best bet. And these are all problems that are just unavoidable. So, we're constantly open to new alternatives.
Yeah, I think it's simply an arms race. So I was checking out some of the publications you've posted on the website, and about, I guess it was 6 months ago, you had basically a doubling in your monthly active users from 100,000 to 200,000, moving from some type of internet persecution move in was it Thailand?
Both,
Vietnam?
Actually.
Okay.
We had one happen from Thailand where there was Facebook censorship, and some major journalists from there moved over, like Paven, minds.com/Paven. And then in Vietnam, there was a quote-unquote cybersecurity law that just went into effect in January, which is essentially like a revolving door between Facebook and Google and the government, and it's essentially a censorship and surveillance measure. So the same thing happened there. We got like 150,000 new users in like a week. So yeah, those are natural events that have been happening for the past 4 years, where, when there's a major scandal, we will see organic growth.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to ask you about. Is that, I think you got your first big pop with the NSA, that sort of controversy, and then Cambridge Analytica scandal added a bunch of users. So, I want to ask, do you think your success as a platform is context dependent on these privacy issues or censorship that happen to the bigger players?
That is definitely a major source of fuel. The more they keep messing up, the easier our job is. But simultaneously, I'm focused on just building interesting technology that people find appealing regardless of all of those issues. And I think the reward system is moving in that direction. It's sort of like, well, why wouldn't you want to be rewarded for your contributions on a network? But then, we're doing really innovative things with video chat as well in the groups. And so I think it's both. I think it has to be a multi-dimensional strategy of being a sort of sanctuary for those digital rights issues, but also, walking the walk and having tech that is really useful to people at the same time.
Right. And I'm thinking, looking into the crystal ball here a bit, if, let's say, the European Commission or the American government would move in and put some really harsh regulations on these platforms, maybe in 5 years, 10 years, would you fall into the same category? If a bunch of users, let's say, 500,000 flooded over to your site, would you fall under the same regulatory rules as those? Because you're open source, because it's crypto. Is it kind of a different beast altogether?
Yeah, I don't know what exactly the regulations would be and how big you would have to be to fall under those regulations. And there's such a wide range of possible scenarios that could turn into. There could potentially be some beneficial regulations, but honestly, most likely they're not going to be intelligently designed. The GDPR and, Article 13 are perfect examples. GDPR is sort of like has good intentions, but it also completely doesn't understand blockchain. And blockchain and GDPR are not compatible because you can't delete from a blockchain. And you can't delete from, peer-to-peer systems, which preserve privacy in a whole other set of ways. So if there was regulations, I imagine we would be subject to those at some point. And I think people throw the word regulation around as like, big tech needs to be regulated very loosely and without much meat and context to what they're actually talking about. So I think that it really all depends, and we have to be precise and very careful about what we legislate.
Yes. Couple last questions for you here. So you've just got a big round of funding, a Series A from Medici Ventures for $6 million, and Medici Ventures is a subsidiary of Overstock that deals with blockchain investments. So how does Minds work with the blockchain, or what's the connection between Minds and blockchain?
So the Minds token is an ERC20 token on the Ethereum blockchain, and our peer-to-peer transactions can be on-chain. Users have the option to basically send the tokens to each other on-chain or off-chain. We try to, encourage people to go on-chain, but the UX is a little bit complex. You have to install this browser extension called MetaMask. It's not that hard, but there's also gas fees associated with it. So when you say, I want to send you 10 tokens because I like your post, that will cost me probably right now, between 25 and 50 cents of Ether in gas. And that's gas fees are how you pay the miners of Ethereum to, incentivize them to power the network. So gas fees are actually a problem in the Ethereum ecosystem that's, a lot of people are trying to solve right now. Mm-hmm. It's, you have credit card fees and whatnot. So, a fee for an ERC20 transaction is, it's not totally unreasonable, but I think that, we want to make it as frictionless as possible. And obviously people like lower fees. But, in the case of that peer-to-peer transaction, I'm tipping you for your content. That would just be fully on chain. So that wouldn't be, the Minds would not be storing those tokens or facilitating that token transaction. So we're basically, that component of the network is quote unquote decentralized. Most of the services on minds.com currently are on central servers. We're also working on a side project called Nomad, which is a fully peer-to-peer network with, totally unreliant on our servers, but that's a work in progress. And we also we're going to start publishing more things to the blockchain in the future. Currently, you can boost a post or advertise a post on chain where a checksum sort of metadata about the advertisement will be posted to the blockchain, which gives you sort of the ability to audit it and provide some ad transparency in a sense. And we're going to keep evolving that. But yeah, we're not like running the whole network on a blockchain. There are some social networks that do that, but you literally have to pay gas for every transaction. So, even commenting or, liking something. So that's, I think, a cool experiment, but it's really not scalable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because one of the things that I saw that you had written about, and it kind of got my gears thinking a bit, was the relationship or the potential for blockchain to serve as a way to look at or sort of trace disinformation. And so you have this model where users can boost on-chain, but there's also an off-chain that is on your servers, but I guess you still have that information. Mm-hmm. So what's the relationship between, or how could a blockchain technology, at least in academia and the policy space, everyone's worried about how do we stop disinformation? And there's a lot of focus on media literacy and things like that. I mean, do you see blockchain as a potential way to counter mis or disinformation?
Well, in the sense that it's immutable, and assuming you're actually publishing readable content, typically it's just references to the blockchain in terms of content. It's not easy to publish heavy content. Usually you have to work with an additional system like IPFS or DAT to, handle bigger content. Some people are publishing some text on chain, which we're looking at. But so to answer your question, I think that it can aid in, providing a record of things, but I don't think that the blockchain is going to fix misinformation. Misinformation is, I think that, humans are important in that process to be commenting on and providing more context about content to, and there should be voting happening and references and fact checking. And that's what's going to help us understand what is and isn't true. The blockchain's not AI.
Right. Yeah, I'm still thinking about it. But,
what are your thoughts? How do you think it can help?
I don't know. I mean, if you could trace transactions to someone who's boosting a lot of content, you might be able to see that in the system that this person is boosting a large amount of content.
That's what you can do. It's it has it's open data to a degree. So it allows that level of, I guess, more public scrutiny and analytics, but central servers, as long as those analytics are exposed, can also do that, though that is not probably as trustworthy. But we're definitely cognizant of and working on an open data initiative and providing more transparency.
Right. But doesn't it work on blockchains where isn't it hashed, so you can't really see that much information and trace it all the way back?
It's not easy. I will say you do sort of have to have some developer experience or some computer science experience in order to do that. But you can build apps on top of it to help basically visualize things. So but yeah, developers are going to have to be involved. It's not like anyone can just go read a novel on the blockchain super easily.
Exactly. Well, I think it's interesting from the crypto aspect to the blockchain and the open source. I mean, it'll be very, very cool to see where it goes in the future. So, Bill, thanks for taking the time out. It's been great.
Yeah, had a really good time. Thanks for having me.
I've just been speaking with Bill Ottman, founder and CEO of Minds. If you want to check out the site, you can go to minds.com and follow us at SMNP Podcast. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Social Media and Politics Podcast. Thank you again for tuning in. Subscribe to the show if you haven't already. You can follow us on Twitter at SMNP Podcast. And don't forget, tell a friend, tell a colleague about the show. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, signing off from Copenhagen. See you next time.